Welcome to KIMEcast, where we break through and cut the BS in sports medicine, rehabilitation, and sports performance, and talk about how things really work. All right, welcome back to KIMEcast. We're talking youth sports today, and so many good questions about this on a regular basis. For how much should my kid throw? How early should we specialize in sports? How many hours a day should they do that? Should they start weight training at a certain age or time? Yeah. Right? I mean, it's endless. So we'll see if we can tackle this and run through some examples of what we see. I mean, I know this last weekend I coached my son. My son's 13. Just so you guys, my son's 13. My daughter's 11. Russ has 3 girls.
11, 9, 7.
Yeah. So we're in this phase where we're getting to meet, having done this for 20 years, and now getting to be part of the process of working with kids. I mean, I think of my kid's team, like son plays basketball. He doesn't play baseball. I wish he did. He plays basketball, but all of his buddies on the basketball team play baseball. So, I mean, the amount of information that I'm exchanging on a weekend at an event, at a game about throwing elbow pain and throwing shoulder pain is really, it's really spectacular. So it's crazy. I'm sure you get the same thing with soccer while you're there.
Oh yeah, completely. What I think is there's like constant debate within a sport. Okay, so you have the baseball subgroup or you have the basketball subgroup. Or how do we, for the basketball athletes, they want to jump higher. For the baseball athletes, they want to throw harder. For the soccer athletes, it's all about like quickness and agility. And so each sport kind of has this like obsession that the parents are very aware about, the athletes want to get better at. And there's this like kind of king quality of the athlete. And it just always amazes me how the further down the rabbit hole you get into any sub-niche, how we have to step back and say, we're taking 11, 12, 13-year-olds and we're doing too much of one thing, and they need variability. They need to be multi-sport. It should be like a requirement for every athlete.
Yeah. So I think a couple things here that to like set the stage a little bit on this conversation for me, just my own personal take on, should my child specialize too early? Should they stay more general? This, that, and the other. Let's just first take a few things off the table just so hopefully we can get some clarity. If you know, so you for the most part will know if your child is a Division I athlete by the time they're 13. So that will be very, very clear to you and to everyone around. There will be no debate about who the best athlete is on the field, and that person is most likely who is going to become your Division I athlete and probably your pro athlete. Or if that's in your radar, that's what we're trying to mold to, you will know that by default. You don't have to do any training whatsoever, and that information will be crystal clear because you don't make it to a higher level Division I sports with training or any other of those things. It's just part of the gig. So let me just put that on the table first. So therefore, if that is your kid, you can do whatever you want. You can go play soccer for 4 years. And then when he turns 16, if he decides he doesn't want to play soccer anymore and wants to start playing hoops, that's no problem. He can start playing hoops and he'll make that team the first time he tries, and he'll probably be dominant at that as well. And then he'll play whatever sport he wants to play or she wants to play, and that's just how it goes. I think I see that very, very consistently. So the idea that like you have to train in one sport to make it to this level of greatness, make it to college to play, that part's not true because it's already going to be established for the most part. Now, I think you can make it to other levels. You can make it to Division II, and you can work really hard and continue your ability to play at higher levels with hard training. But let's just put that on the table, that if you're thinking you're going to get a full ride scholarship to play a sport, what one you choose is irrelevant. That athlete is going to be this goes on and on. I mean, we knew LeBron James, who he was when he was a 7th grader. You go to any like real AAU basketball tournament, it's obvious when you see the 7th grade kid that's like, oh, that's that person. Michael Jordan was not even a good basketball player. He got cut, and then he came back and made the squad, and 4 years later is the best player in the world. So it's just crazy what the right genetics, the right person, the right athlete can do. They can do any sport they want once they decide to focus on it.
Yeah, I just did a quick search as you were talking. We have anywhere from 30 to 50,000 professional athletes in the United States of America. And if you have, and these people are probably, majority of them are in their 20s, maybe a handful are in their 30s. And so then if you kind of just do that ratio, like, 50,000 professional athletes, let's just say probably anywhere from, 50 to 70 million people between the ages of say 20 and 35. So those are your odds. That's what you're playing with. And so really, if we're not grooming D1 or professional athletes, then the question is, what are we doing?
Why are you playing sports? Which is a great question. And I love it. I mean, my kids will not be playing Division I sports, and I love that they're playing sports.
I think lessons could go on. Let's just rattle off some lessons. I think all kids need to struggle. They need to have obstacles, and they need to battle hard and fight and lose often and hopefully win sometimes. And they win with their own grit.
Yeah, I agree. They learn how to win is an amazing thing. I didn't really learn that myself because we lost so much during my high school years. But when I got to college, I really learned what it meant to win and kind of the dedication and the focus and the difference in the effort level to win was really tremendous. So I think learning how to win is a tremendous skill you can learn from sports. And I think learning that before you get into the business world really helps from a clarity of mindset standpoint, because I think it can be really tricky in the business world.
I think the learning of win can be the score. I think the win could also be relationships. The win could also be proving something to yourself that you can improve in your movement, speed, power, athleticism, the touch on the ball.
Yeah, learn how to practice.
Learn how to practice. Learn how to be effective. I think that struggle and fight is really high.
Yeah, I think for me, I was always in team sports, so learning how to play as a team and learning how to work with each other to set up a strategy. It's like, hey, here's our best strategy to win the game is to these players do these things, so you have a role and you start to understand your role, which is very similar to business and to success in many ways.
Which is teamwork and social connection and reliance on someone else and being there for someone else. And that, I think, interpersonal connection is second, very, very high.
100%. Yeah, to get it to that level where you've got to have that that level of dedication where you're all fighting against the same failure or the same loss, and then can you get together, or can you rally together, and then can you do something better? So I think playing sports for me is not about getting a D1 scholarship athlete as much as it is like developing those skills in my kids, at least, and in other kids. Teach them how to compete, teach them how to work hard, teach them how to practice to get better, teach them how to work as a team are huge values.
There's a great book I'm reading, and I'm hell-bent on making sure every person I know reads this book. It's called The Anxious Generation. And every ill thing that the author portrays about the dangers of technology, the dangers of really using the innovation of social media, for certain benefits like connecting relationship. He just talks about all the dangers of it and what youth sports medicine, what youth sports, what comp sports, recreational sports, what all this is the anti that. If everything about culture in the last 20, 30 years, all of the bad things about our developmental culture, I think sports mitigates the majority of that. Connecting with people, struggling with something physical, learning skills, challenging yourself, fighting in that way. It is the anti of, I think, the worst part of our global culture, and particularly for youth. And I think this is the main battle. I think this is like the frontier of where development really exists. I think there's a strong part of school, education, learn some things about whether it's academics or math and reading and applying it to life. But there's another huge piece. I think you can get it with chess. I think you can get it with the decathlete and the competitive spirit of an academic. But I think it lives and breathes very strongly in sports.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you're right. You can get it in other games and stuff. I think that what you mentioned very first is the ability to struggle. I think that having the failure, if they fail and then can learn how to practice and then bounce back from that and improve and face those challenges, those would be, that to me is everything. Because sometimes you get too late in life where you failed too late, and then you completely get depressed. It can really mess with you mentally as far as you don't come back from it. But if you face those challenges and younger and you realize, hey, if I apply myself in this way, I can change the direction, I can change the tone, I can get to a different level. I think then you're empowered with those skills.
Yeah.
You're moving on.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of this is more or less like the brain, personality, attitude, perseverance, and grit side of things. I think to flip it, right now, I learned this in grad school. I went to grad school at UC Davis. I studied biomedical engineering, and I had a whole class where all we did was study bones. Imagine 3 months of just studying the mechanical attributes of bone and how bone is stressed and how it adapts. And in that class, my professor taught us an important concept. He said, osteoporosis is a childhood disease that manifests itself when you're elderly. And the roots of that concept are, if you don't jump and run and challenge your body enough during your growing years, you will have a brittle skeleton that will show its very ugly head in your 50s. And it comes in the form of osteopenia.
Yeah.
And more likely to have all of the bad bone stuff that happens in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So, we have, the baby boomers right now are suffering that because, sports wasn't as, just a lot of movement wasn't as prized for particularly females back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yeah, totally. That's a super interesting point.
And so it's, going back to what are we doing? Well, we're doing a lot for your structure to be able to live a great life.
Yeah, there's actually a physical benefit there for sure. It's funny, I've never broken anything in my life, but my son broke his finger last Monday, right? Just playing basketball, so that we faced that. It's a little bit of stress and a little bit of now unload it. Let's go through the process, But it definitely makes you stronger that way, as far as both physically and mentally. I think having to deal with some of those challenges.
Yeah, and then if it's not bones, where did he break again?
He broke the bone, but just in his thumb and the first phalanx.
How did he
just above the knuckle? It was just jammed it.
Like basketball?
He was defending it, deflected a pass. So he deflected the ball, but it hit straight on and just cracked it. It's fine. I made him go back in.
Nice.
We didn't know it was broken at the time, so naturally.
Well, there's an opportunity for toughness.
Sure was. Yeah, sure was. He's like, it hurts pretty bad. I said, yeah, I'm sure that it does. Let's get in there. And then, it was still swollen that night and the next day, and then I pinched it, and it was pretty painful. So I'm like, all right, we better. Let's call some friends and see if we can get an image here. Phone a friend, and so he cracked it. So that was a great parenting moment. But we definitely built some toughness, and I was happy that he gave it a shot. I gave him some options. He chose to give it a shot again. So,
yeah,
the hand never touched the ball. I can promise you that. But I think you mentioned a couple of things we were talking beforehand too about different sports and where you play them. Whether it be an inside or outside, and some of the effects that might have on your development. If you're a tremendous distance cross country runner and you're outside in the sun for so many hours a day, or you play soccer outside, this and that, and you compare that to basketball or volleyball, where you're often, at least indoor volleyball, where you're inside for hours and hours a day. That there's some negative to that, and we see some negative stuff in basketball and court sports. Maybe hopefully not as much now. Now these kids have my son's never been on a concrete basketball court, I don't think, except for recess, which is amazing. It's a staggering thought. I grew up playing on concrete, and I know that the people before me, you see them, these guys are 60 years old walking around. They played basketball. Maybe they made it to the NBA, or at least played in college, and they can't walk at all.
Their knees are shot. Yeah. No more cartilage left.
Watch Kenny Smith on TNT. His knees are just bowed in, just
horrible,
gone,
all swollen and knobbly.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just we beat it up by playing so many years on those surfaces. So
yeah. Completely. Well, right now I'm managing about 4 or 5 ACLs, and they're all indoor sport ACLs. I don't have a soccer ACL. I have 2 volleyball, 2 basketball, and I do. It does make me wonder, about vitamin D and their hormonal profile, and was that a component? I'm not sure. I haven't seen that research.
Well, it wouldn't have been a component in my era because I would have never played in the gym.
Completely.
It wasn't an option. I mean, to get gym time was sacred, especially for your own personal practice, much less for the team practice. Yeah. My freshman year we practiced outside on the blacktop before the sun came up, so it was the same problem. But as far as the now, my son's never played a practice outside. I think we've done some warm-ups one day, just to kind of, before we can go into the gym early, but not really physical, but hard play. And that's all we did growing up. That's how we played on the playground, Yeah. That's not the case in many, many sectors, So I think that there's some factors there. The indoor sports are more and more indoor all the time. I think volleyball, people used to go play at the beach, play on the grass and stuff. And, I think that's much more played just at the gyms now because there's so many more courts available and so many more formal practices and camps and everything else.
Well, I think, this goes back to, the multi-sport option. I think when you find other paths of movement, if the basketball athlete also enjoys fishing, if the soccer athlete also likes throwing some things, I think you need to have some smart pairings that, if you're indoors with sport, you need to find another hobby that's outdoors. If you do something with a lot of throwing, like baseball, you need to do other things that challenge how fast you are. I had a baseball kid where he was 13 and his posture line was abysmal. He's growing. And he wasn't 13. He was 15. He was kind of like done growing, and you would expect his posture line to start to normalize because he's 15, 16. And the parent asked, he had an ASLR of like 40 degrees, something horrible. And the parent asked, what stretches should my kid do? And I refrained from giving him stretches because I just didn't want to believe, I still don't believe that a 15-year-old needs to do that many stretches. I said he needs to run fast as he can often. So the problem with baseball is he spends a lot of time throwing, hitting, and then moving quickly to a base, which really doesn't fully open up your stride for more than 5 steps. And I think the baseball athlete might do a few sprints as their warm-up, and that's about it. The rest of it's technical practice, and let's play the game that is not very running heavy.
Well, the sprinting is debatable because no one's chasing them.
Completely. Right. Whereas, if I manage a lot of soccer athletes, and I don't have a single soccer athlete that has a poor posterior line. That doesn't really happen that much in soccer because they run so much. How could the body possibly not adapt, with that amount of sprinting? Yeah. But you could say that for, say, a jogger.
The distance runners, they all have tight hamstrings.
Yeah.
Because they don't open it up.
They don't open it up. So I think it's really critical to pair it with things that are very dissimilar to the sport. And I think some parents want to double up on something that's similar because they think it might get an extra edge. That's the wrong thought. I think you need a pairing that's very dissimilar. If you're inside, get outside. If you're not running fast, run fast. If you're not doing anything aerobic, get aerobic. You need to kind of pair it with other buckets.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. Could you imagine, if we started to see, there was some sort of tie in, stress fractures or whatever in more elite, volleyball, basketball, and it was maybe the fact that they weren't outside like they were in the generations before.
Right.
That'd be wild. Right. But it's amazing to think about all these things we're trying to solve, the high levels of sports medicine. And I have guys on most of these teams, and I don't think they're considering the vitamin D level the kid had at 15.
Yeah. Right.
So that'd be a heck of a concept. Right. Certainly, I think a factor, to your point, if osteoporosis is a condition seen later that didn't start with, and we know that. We know that if you are listening with osteoporosis and this is of concern for you, if you're below the age of 30, there's a chance you have to do more impact and weight-loaded stuff to improve your level. And then we know it's a slow decline from the age of 30 on to the end. And you can affect the rate of the decline, but you can no longer increase past the age of 30. That's well documented and proven that even doing weight-bearing exercise or jumping impact activities are not going to improve your bone density. They will keep it from losing.
That's right.
Slow it down, perhaps.
That's right.
But they will not increase it to a higher level. So,
well, to kind of go back to the first part where you said, by 13, 14, you're going to know you're dealing with a D1 athlete. One way of interpreting that is you're dealing with someone with a high amount of growth hormone and huge kinetic awareness. And for a lot of people who want to copy a program from an influencer online, or they look at, whatever, Jay Hertz did, with his program, I want to squat just like him. I want to program just like him because he's my favorite quarterback. When you model someone that's a super adapter, I don't think it's a great model for the majority of just regular people that have regular adaptation curves. And so I think you need to really be aware of if it worked for that person, then it's going to work for me. Not so. The super adapter, you have them run uphill and they get huge legs. For a lot of other people, that's not enough. You're going to have to do a lot more to that stimulus. And that just goes back to really you have to kind of look at, for anyone that's parents or that influences kids, make sure they have enough activity in different buckets to help them grow and develop, and not to obsess about I want to groom, a D1 or a professional level athlete. It's really a silly thing.
Yeah, modeling after what you can appreciate and you can look at it and respect and ask questions, but to model or try and chase the progression is it's not the same map. It's not the same pathway. We were just talking about a young man earlier. There's a 5-star athlete, kid out of Oregon. He plays defensive end, linebacker, and going into the NFL. And we were rehabbing a groin strain. And then we get into the rehab process where he gained all the mobility back and gained all the basic strength back. And then we were working at more advanced strength. And he was working to the deadlift. And we're using a hex bar at the time because he's 6'5", like 265. So there's a long way to the ground with those levers. So I just felt more comfortable in the hex bar to kind of through the rehab process. And we maxed out the bar. I couldn't put any more 45-pound plates on the bar. We were holding the bar on with rubber bands. And this is, just 2 months after, 4 months after the surgery, 2 months after we kind of like got things healed up for the most part and kind of started to get into that next phase. So he's 4 months post-op and he's lifting weight that most people have never seen someone lift before. Mm-hmm. These are the kind of, you put them on a weight on a back squat bar and the bar is bending. Mm-hmm. Most people haven't seen that live, Mm-hmm. You start seeing that live enough times, you're like, oh, this is not normal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because just the average person it's insane. Can you chase it? Is it interesting? Yeah. Should you expect to achieve it? Probably not. Because the crazy thing about that is he's maxed it out 4 months after having a lower extremity surgery where he couldn't hardly walk. Yeah. And 4 months later, he's already doing more than most people will ever dream of in their life. Yeah. Imagine if he trained for a year. Yeah. What he could do.
As you talk there, I think what we have to really do is master the adaptation curve of the person in front of us. And whether you're dealing with a D1 or a professional, or you're dealing with a 15-year-old that's growing, I get really personally emotionally connected to the statement that 8-year-olds, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, they should do hard stuff that helps their body grow versus spending an excessive amount of time on the nuance of technique. And I think there is this early specialization, like, oh, I want to make the best team. My 12-year-old's a high-level thrower, and if we just get 2 more miles an hour with this particular curve, it's going to be game-changing. So focus on performance in the moment most often sacrifices the development for the future.
Yeah.
And if you focus on too much of a nuance of a detail in that sport, and you forget the overall big picture of development, not only is it not healthy, and you're more likely to see a PT because you just ripped your labrum or ripped your ligament, or you have a pain pattern you can't get rid of, but you also miss the opportunity to actually develop because you got some good, hormonal drive that can help you.
Yeah, totally true. I think I'll talk about baseball, for example. I think, first of all, like getting the overarching theme here is, multi-development, like develop and get different things. Like you said, do something inside, something outside, do different sports, develop the athlete first, young and early, develop the athlete first and continue to develop the athlete for as long as you possibly can. And I understand the challenge of youth sports nowadays where if you don't have the best athlete on your hands and you want to give them the best chance to play at the next level, say in high school, then you do have to start doing some really skilled, specific sport things so that they could take advantage of the things they are good at, because they're probably not going to beat everybody athletically. Sure. So I think that's a thing. I mean, that's my situation. Sure. I think that if I've told my son, Luke, I said, if you're going to play basketball in high school, you have to be the best shooter in the city. Sure. That's the message. Yeah. Because you're not going to be the fastest guy. You're not going to jump higher than anybody out there. Right. You can be strong and you can be really smart and know the game. But if you want to play, like that's going to be one of the tools that you're going to have to develop, that you can start to develop now. But it doesn't mean he's not still playing soccer or he's not still playing golf and he's not still doing other sports. But nonetheless, when you talk about baseball, we see this so early that they want to be great. And, the most unfortunate thing that we get to see as PTs is at this critical age of like 12 and 13, the baseball kids are starting to get bigger. They're starting to mature, go through puberty. They're developing. They have big growth spurts. And the best athletes are throwing hard. Mm-hmm. And, hey, they want to win. We all want to win as coaches. So they tend to throw more often because they're good. They throw hard. They throw fast. Maybe they've got a lot of skill, been throwing for 3 or 4 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. So they're getting really good. So guess what? They get to throw more often. They're throwing harder. They're generating more force. But because they're going through these growth spurts and they have a bit of an advantage at the time, it's a disservice to them because now the growth spurt is the bone grew longer, the muscle is not able to tolerate that amount of new leverage and force, and then the ligaments, and they're in the same situation, the ligaments haven't adapted fully. So now is where we see At this age, we see more of the avulsion fracture problem. So this would be like your growth plate of the shoulder fractured, or your fracture on the medial aspect of the elbow, or common in baseball. You might get an ischial tuberosity on the hamstring for like a sprint guy in this 12, 13 age group. But we see that all the time. And I've seen it so much that I go to a parent and say, I'd strongly consider, if my son went through a 6-inch growth spurt at this age and playing baseball was it, like this would be just DH him this season.
Yeah, completely.
But maybe not put him on the mound.
Yeah, or put him in second, or have him sprint out, in the outfield.
If he's that big of a contributor, he's that good of an athlete, give him something else to do. But him pitching this year is not at 12 or 13. You want to be the best pitcher at 22.
Right.
If you're the best pitcher at 12, the chance you make it 22 is almost zero.
Yeah. And I think every parent can say, like, I want my kid to be engaged with the activity as long as they desire. And they desire it less when they hurt. When there's an injury and they can't use their elbow for 3 months, they're like, well, I really didn't like that very much.
Yeah, it's quite a process. I mean, the rehab process of this is terrible, because you shut it down, and then you gotta go through the rehab cycle and let the bone heal, and then you gotta strengthen it back up. The best part about it, and I say this to every kid that I see, I said, hey, I'm sorry that you're here. And I had like 6 in a row the other day. I have the same exact problem. I'm like, look, I'm sorry that you're here. I know you don't want to be here, but what I'm going to teach you in this process, I'm going to teach you to take care of your body like you're a big leaguer. So for the next several years, you're going to learn, and you're going to be able to apply a strategy that you never have to come back. But at the end of the day, it could be avoided.
Yep.
If we were looking at sports specificity, hey, you grew a lot, let's shut the throwing down and go play soccer for a little while or something. And I know it's not quite that easy. I get it. Like I got kids. I've been doing this for a long time. But as hard as that is, and as possible as that is, that would be the best decision medically.
Yep. Or they could do track and field, or a rec sport.
There's plenty of things. Or they could start working out. I mean, it'd be great to put some load on the body. That's another big thing. People are afraid to have a kid lift, like put some weights on, or is it too much too early? Because everyone in our age group and above, all the dads have all heard, that stunts your growth. That is the biggest load of bullshit in the world. It stimulates your growth. It's going to stimulate more growth hormone, more testosterone. Yeah. But you have to fuel with it. So you have to then eat properly and load the tissue. But
I think strength training becomes the multi-sport. For some athletes where maybe they don't have any other interest in any other activity, then they hike, fish, and work out. And that's maybe a great antidote to whether it's a court athlete or a single, sport athlete. Yeah. Okay. It's gym time and spend on time hiking outside. And that might be the great combo. I think these smart combos, I look at for my 3 daughters, I'll tell you the combos. I've got a soccer volleyball combo, then I have a dance soccer combo, and then I got a gymnastics soccer combo. And I remember when my middle the dance teacher wanted her to go full dance. She's 9 years old, and she's like, hey, we can go places. I want her to do the elite level dance, which I'm not sure if any of you have seen the show Dance Moms, what a crazy nut show that is. But these people live at the dance studio like they do in some sport. Very few sports literally have you like live there, and dance is one of them. And I said, you know what, I can't have you just do one sport. I think my simple rule is you got to be a multi-sport athlete. And since you're doing, 13, 14 hours of that sport each week, there's no room for any other. So you got to find something else. You need to have a combo. And I think that worked well. She picked soccer.
She's a beast.
Yeah, she picked soccer and recreational dance.
That one's a beast too. She has the competitive spirit. She's your one for sure that's got the younger one might have it too.
Yeah, we'll see.
She's pretty fiery.
Yeah.
But I think the big message here is like, if training is a good thing for these kiddos, and it doesn't have to be like weightlifting, like you don't do barbells and doing those types of things, although that's not wrong if you have the ability and the training and the right technique and the right passion, if the kid's really into it, I think it's great. But you don't have to use a barbell. There's so many more things you could do and starting to use load. We know that with certainly with boys, with young men, that there's developmental windows where there's what we call speed windows. So this has been pretty well researched, pretty well documented, and we see it in a couple ways through, some of it started with like surveying. So looking at, okay, John Elway, Tiger Woods, people who did something really, really well. Hey, what did you do when you were a kid? Kind of conversations. And turns out that there's a speed window between the ages of like 6 and 8 years old. That's a time where you want to do something that's fairly powerful. You want to throw something as far as you can. Not necessarily really heavy, but you want to be able to throw something far. You want to be able to jump high. You want to be able to do something where it exhibits higher amounts of power. So using a medicine ball for training at those times are great. To use like a very light ball, like a 4-pound ball, but throw it as far as you can. Throw it as high as you can in the air. Get them to use their body and generate high levels of force. There's a window that for some reason neurologically that can be developed at a rapid phase in that time.
Both are rotational athletes, and then having something like, hey, heave something, throw something, generate power with like which all kids do. They skip rocks, they see who could throw the farthest,
Exactly. Yeah, you look at the natural tendency, it makes sense, right? You see, and then when they play tag, they want to race each other. Like sprinting is kind of part of that same equation.
Yeah, predator and prey. You got to bring out the natural biologics there. Chase something or be chased.
Exactly. There's natural things they do, and try to throw rocks at each other or, at the end of the lake, hopefully, whatever it might be. But absolutely. So do something powerful from the ages of 6 to 8 is a big one. And then there's another window around 13 to 15, 12 to 14, somewhere just post-puberty there, where that's more of a linear speed type of a focus of like do something that really requires you to run at top end speed, run fast, accelerate, run fast. And those two windows seem to be highly correlated with developing athleticism, especially in males. Women is the same, only the window's about a year earlier due to puberty changes. So there's our assumption at least.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That goes back to, good pairing of activities and challenge different buckets and, do motor control stuff, do balance stuff, throw some stuff, kick some stuff, because the rotational athlete's a thrower and a kicker of how you pivot and turn.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's it is such a fascinating topic because I kind of reflect back of my life and how, I don't think a lot of us give enough credit to our parents, but our parents really did kind of set us up for what type of body success, movement success we have as adults, and what activities you did, what did they pick for you, and how engaged were you. And I always remember like the times where I'd go from soccer practice to martial arts. It was always kind of interesting to do 2 activities in the same day, or knowing that my activities were Tuesday, Thursday of this, Monday, Wednesday of this. And it was so regular for my lifestyle to always be doing really challenging physical movements and competing against other people that it became secondhand to me. And I try and preach that with my daughters. But I don't think we could do enough here. It's, pairings of activities rather than just do one. But the pairings could be endless, and I think the gym and the strength training and the getting outside and doing outdoor, more camping, hiking, cross country running outside, even like fishing, just being engaged, I think is a great pairing. So it's not always about like grooming an athlete; it's grooming a good physically capable body.
Yeah, I think being outside, you bring in a lot of variables too, like the uneven surfaces and like visual acuity and these different things that are happening like in the outdoors, whether if you go camping or you go out for a hike or you're just, outdoor trail running or whatever it might be. But being out and about, you do see a development in their connection to the earth, their nature, their development of like their feet, their balance, their control. They climb, they're more likely to want to go climb a rock or climb a tree or something outside, which, is an interesting concept. Like if you think about climbing for shoulder development, it's something we do a lot in our youth, like really, really youth, like in your TK days in your kindergarten and maybe first grade. And then you start getting away from the playground. And then at that point, you're no longer hanging from things. Mm-hmm. So you're not hanging from monkey bars anymore, which is, people could say, it's risky, you break your arm. But yeah, that's true. Well, then you learn not to fall in a hurry. But, that's one skill that we stopped doing. We stopped hanging by, maybe age 6, 7, 8. And it's a big problem. That's a Western culture thing. That's in China. That's one of the things they're not doing. So they developed pretty elaborate playground structures to allow climbing into adulthood and to encourage it, because this nature of climbing development is a huge aspect of core strength, huge aspect of shoulder development, of getting your arm overhead. So it's interesting the way that we play when we're young, and then if you get into certain activities, you just simply won't do that anymore.
Well, that goes back to the grip as a life skill. Your grip is tied to your morbidity or your life expectancy, to your survival. In China, they're on average 60% in one hand will be of their body weight. 60% of their body weight in one hand. That's going to be their normative squeeze for someone that lives in China. and I didn't know the reason why, and I think you kind of hit the nail. They, as a country, they've recognized that and instilled that as a component. For the record, the U.S. is 50%. So that's just normative data, but you should be able to squeeze half of your body weight with one arm. If you can't, that's bad. But how do you do that? Well, young people can develop elite grip by hanging, especially if they hang on one arm.
Yeah. No, it's a tremendous strengthening skill set that you have to develop, and that I think something we just get away from. And it's usually not reproduced in the weight room again either, because then you get into the pull-up testing, right? Let's go to PE and do pull-up tests, and like nobody can do one. Even the boys, if they get one, is like amazing. Some kids get 4 or 5, and some kids get 10, but then that's it. That's less than 1% of the population. Most kids don't want to get on the bar.
Well, yeah. So if you think of all the things youthful, I would say, cartwheels and handstands are right up there with climbing and, squatting really deep and jumping. I was working with a firefighter. He's a little older than me, and he just had a disc replacement in his neck, and I was trying to help him learn how to unlock his spine so that he can kind of get back to elite level firefighting. So we were doing some rolling patterns and segmental roll-ups and full cobra extension and full rotation through his spine so that he doesn't continue to hurt his neck since he has disc replacement. Because I educated him that, well, it's just one disc, and the doc says you're not really that likely to hurt that segment. You'll hurt above or below. So to teach how the spine really works is a really broad concept. So I kind of got a little playful with him in a session, like, hey, we're going to act like a kid. We're going to roll around, move around, and let's do youthful activities so that you become more youthful in that. And this goes back to, a good pairing of activities for youth sports really applies to adults well. We should be posting on our hands. We should be attempting some way of doing, a plank with your feet up is a handstand. And if you roll around and try and roll onto your back and roll up, that's a pretty good use of a segmental flexion in your spine along with the squat pattern. And then you can implement some jumping in there. So I think how we look at kids should also reflect in the youthfulness of an adult. And can we get there?
Yeah. All right, so looking at it as a whole, we could talk the idea of playing different sports, having variety as long as you can for as much as you can for as long as you can is the key. I think that athleticism is often genetic, and some kids just have it. If they don't have it, I think you have to develop it longer, which means playing multiple sports. But don't compare yourself to the already recognized D1 athlete who's playing 3 or 4 sports at a high level and MVP of every team. That may or may not expire, depending by post-puberty. Like that is probably the biggest thing that I watch that's frustrating right now. Like before, when I was just a PT serving kids that would come into the clinic, and now being a dad and a coach at this age group, it's truly miraculous, and I've been hearing it forever about how everybody thinks their kid's going to do these things and stuff as they go. They're going to be all these amazing players, this, that, and the other, and it's like, man, it's just the wrong focus to focus on like. The odds that they make it are just not that great unless they're already like dominant. But the dominant kids can be multi-sport athletes very, very easily because they're just super athletic. So develop athleticism as much as you can, play as many sports as you can, and then delay your specialization as much as you can. But when you need to, then I think you need to put it in. But that doesn't mean you really have to shut everything else down either. I mean, there's a time limit to the day, to your point, but I think you do the best you can to extend that out. And then as you get into training, I think the training for the youth is very important. I think that what I would look at here is everybody wants to be faster and throw harder. And the problem with that is that that's already what practice is doing.
Yeah.
So they're at practice running all day long, sprinting.
Trying to beat out their friend, trying to throw harder and faster than their friend.
Yeah, that's already happening. So you don't necessarily have to do additional training to throw faster and harder, in my opinion. I think that you already have a lot of those tools there. You could do some technique work in those areas for sure, but you really want to start building like your mass, like build your bones, build your muscle density, build the tissues and the ligaments that support you so that as you grow into it, that body's more robust and it can tolerate more forces, which is going to make you more dynamic.
I think the visual there is a pyramid. How wide's your base?
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody says, you don't want to build a house on a sand foundation. You want the foundation to be solid and strong. And if the kid's already doing all this velocity work just because he's throwing with his friends, like it's naturally he's going to compete and throw harder. going to do more velocity work isn't really the answer. Going to do, let's build my foundation work so I can tolerate the velocity I'm getting, or I can use it to a better advantage, would be a better angle to take. And then at some point, they will flip. Like your foundation will get big enough where now you can go back out and do some velocity work and you'll make some bigger gains. But if you don't do the foundation work, the velocity will eventually kill you. It'll eventually break the system, and then you'll be injured, and then you can't participate.
Yeah, I think as you talk, I think there's a certain age when as a physical therapist, you can give an exercise and expect the kid to do it. Maybe that's around, I think maybe 12 for a female, maybe more like 13, 14 for a male, that you can actually give an exercise prescription and they'll do the exercise. Earlier than that, it's actually a game. You have to be playful with how to balance out the person. And so if you have an 11-year-old boy that's playing a lot of baseball and something is a little tight, something's a little restricted, they're not moving really well, it's actually like, what's the right game to get you? And if it's, if they've got some friends like, hey, I bet you can't do this. And it's usually a calisthenic thing. Let's see who can do a pull-up, who can see a full depth push-up, who can do a handstand, who can walk on their hands. I think challenging movement in playful ways for young kids is really important because they're just not going to do exercise. Right. It's kind of hard to give an 11-year-old exercise. Yeah, you have to give them a challenge.
Plus, it wouldn't be the right choice anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they had something very specific happen, but that's also not the case. For injuries for kids, just so you guys know too, you don't have real injuries in kids until pretty much puberty. So whatever that is for them, 12, 13, 14, like they might break a bone, fall off monkey bars or like falling off something, but that's good. It challenges their confidence and maybe keeps them a bit in check at times. So that's a different story, but you very rarely see any kind of like tendon or ligament tear at an age, certainly prior to 11, if not 12, 13. So it's usually post-puberty. So the people we're very, very stretchy as humans, very, very elastic as humans early on, very bouncy. And then as you start to mature, your tissues firm up, they become more solid, and then there's more likely that you can damage and tear them. So, you can get away with a lot before 12, 13, but then at that point, it's like a critical moment that like all of a sudden things shift when they hit that puberty phase, and then it's a different game. And that's usually where we meet people for the first time. But going into that, if you did some strength training and such prior to that, I think that window could be pushed back or avoided.
Absolutely. Well, I think, if we have users that are listening this deep into our podcast, this might be like a nice little gem. I think one special thing, if I could say that I have some special knowledge that's different than the other parents on any other sport, it's that I understand body type. And so when you have kids or you have people that you influence and you're able to actually steer them in certain activities, to steer them in either an activity or a position within an activity that they're more likely to have success, whether or not they're lengthy, whether they're more stocky, whether they're more, pound and ground, speaking like an MMA knowledge, but like, they like making a lot of contact, or they're more evasive, like thinking of what they naturally do, both their brain and their body, and harnessing that, for, a lot of athletes are frankly just too heavy in my opinion. They're too heavy and almost too grounded, and they need to learn how to lighten up a little bit because they already do heavy and grounded well. So to teach them to be a little bit lighter might be less stressful on their body. And the opposite, maybe if someone is literally flying because they're all tendons and really thin bones, putting some strength training so that their bones kind of get that stress. So in other words, what are they naturally good at? Totally. Pick the right position, the right sport. But also, if they have a natural giftedness, should you balance them out and do some of the opposites so that they don't fall risk to too much of that bucket item?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Is remember, sports is an opportunity to develop the body, develop the human, like we talked about. Develop the structure, develop the strength, develop the mental fortitude. It's more than just go out there and try to win, or go out there and try to advance yourself to the higher level. Although that should be part of the process. But keep in mind, what is it that you're actually in the sport for? What are we trying to teach? Like to teach you body awareness and body confidence, and know how your body works, learn how it functions, learn how to fuel it, learn how what happens when you go to practice and you didn't eat before, and you start getting lightheaded and dizzy. It's good to learn that at 11 or 12 years old and be like, oh shit, I gotta think, I gotta plan a little bit. I have some commitments here. Like I need to figure this out. Oh, I got to eat a little bit. Like all of a sudden, then it's not mom just harping on you that you actually have experienced it. And you're like, now you're the one saying, hey, I got to eat before I go.
That's
so I don't
a life lesson right there.
Exactly. Yeah. learning those things early and sooner, I think, just makes it better for this individual to be more successful in the next phases of life. Because we see people who, you don't have to do sports. There's other ways to develop these skills as well. We see people who are less involved socially or in these areas and haven't challenged themselves. I think it's harder for them to accept challenges later on in life, in their 20s and their 30s. Stuff starts to get really real and get tough, and it's difficult.
Yeah, you have to get that practice of how to tackle difficult things, and the sooner you engage in that, the better. Whether it is learning how to tie a fish hook or trying to beat out someone with a soccer ball, you got to teach a lesson.
Yeah.
Oh, and earlier and often.
That's it. All right, well, enjoy out there with the youth sports. Hope your weekends are filled.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Shouldn't be a problem. Thanks for watching KIMEcast. If you have any comments, hit us up in the comment section on YouTube. We'd love to interact with you, answer any questions you have, dive a little deeper with you in that forum. Have a good one.
See ya.